Canada is known around the world for many things: poutine, long harsh winters, magnificent wildlife. But one thing I feel like we don't get enough recognition for is our absolutely unhinged TV shows. A few years ago now, one of my favorite YouTubers and fellow Canadian, Curtis Connor, made a couple of videos about some weird Canadian TV shows he watched growing up, and it made me realize that a lot of our TV shows are a little different. So I wanted to take a deeper dive into the wacky and wonderful world of Canadian television and look at a few different shows that aired during my childhood. Before I get into talking about specific shows, I want to give a little bit of a history lesson. I know that sounds boring, but bear with me because this provides some important context. So, when television was first introduced to Canada in the 1950s, there were no Canadian-specific TV stations. People who lived near the Canada-US border were able to receive American stations, so they watched American shows. But the Canadian government didn't like this. In order to prevent American imperialism and promote Canadian national identity and unity, the first Canadian TV stations were introduced in 1952, being the French and English versions of the CBC, or Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Many more stations followed in the ensuing years. In the 70s, the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, or CRTC, was formed as a regulatory agency for telecommunications in Canada. They currently mandate that at least 55% of a Canadian station's programming must be Canadian-produced. These are known as Canadian Content, or CanCon laws. A similar law prohibits American stations from being offered in Canada if a similar Canadian station already exists, which is why we don't get a lot of the big American stations here and instead have Canadian versions of them. Some of the stations I'll be mentioning today include Family Channel, which was our version of Disney Channel, Teletoon instead of Cartoon Network, and YTV instead of Nickelodeon. Many stations were less than enthusiastic about CanCon laws because it was much cheaper to acquire the rights to an existing American show than to produce a whole new show in Canada from scratch, so they kind of did the bare minimum in order to meet the CanCon requirements. This led to a lot of low-budget and occasionally subpar content being produced. Although the shows I'll be discussing today are all iconic, in my opinion, it's clear that the budgets were a far cry from that of many American TV shows, and this could be a contributing factor to their uniqueness. Of course, I can't talk about wacky, zany, goofy, silly Canadian TV shows without talking about the Trailer Park Boys. This show is a certified Canadian classic, just like Butter Tarts and Keanu Reeves. You're welcome. For those who aren't familiar with it, TPB is a mockumentary-style comedy show that follows the antics of the residents of Sunnyvale Trailer Park, a fictional trailer park in Nova Scotia. It mainly focuses on three main characters, Ricky, Julian, and Bubbles, and the illegal schemes they come up with to try and make money that usually land them in jail by the end of the season. The show was based on a movie directed by series creator Mike Clattenburg and started airing in 2001 on the Canadian channel Showcase. It initially ended in 2008 before being picked up by Netflix in 2014, who continued to produce new episodes until 2018. It's now become a whole franchise with several movies, spin-off series, their own streaming service, merchandise. Particularly in the early seasons, the show's minimal budget was pretty apparent. It was filmed handheld style in various real-life trailer parks around Nova Scotia, until complaints from residents necessitated they build a set for the later seasons. If you've seen the show, it's not hard to see why. While it was loosely scripted, much of the dialogue and humor was improvised, and many of the actors weren't even professionals but rather friends of the show's creator. I think this actually works in the show's favor, as it plays into the whole mockumentary thing and gives the show a uniquely unhinged energy.
Have you read the Bible?
Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. What's it to you?
Can you read, my son?
Well, that depends. Can you go fuck yourself?
Oh yeah, raising the kitty roof, you know what I'm saying? What's going on? Raising the roof with Daisy up my head too. Daisy talking about, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
Did you ever watch pornos?
Why?
It became an underground hit in Canada, but only a censored version was aired in the US until 2009, when it was picked up by DirecTV. It kind of became the blueprint for later mockumentary shows like The Office and low-life comedies like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. A true Canadian heritage moment. A lot of CanCon that became popular internationally was children's programming, and every show I'm going to be discussing from here on out was aimed at children or teens. My personal favorite of these shows is 16. It was an animated comedy drama series that followed 6 teens who were 16, as they hung out at this ridiculous mall that had an amusement park, a movie theater, and a skating rink, among other things, which was actually based on a real-life mall called the West Edmonton Mall in Edmonton, Alberta. Probably the coolest thing about that city. The show aired from 2004 to 2010 on Teletoon in Canada and on Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network in the States. However, 24 of the 93 episodes were actually censored or even outright banned in the US. The show's co-creator had noticed that preteens often watch sitcoms targeted at adults because of their smart writing, fast-paced dialogue, and various plot lines, and he strove to make a show like this that was targeted at them. This led to the show having a more risque sense of humor than other shows targeted at the same demographic. Episodes were censored for things like strong language, kissing, innuendo, implied nudity, and references to shoplifting and homosexuality. For example, Season 1, Episode 22 was banned due to the plot revolving around the girls being on their periods. Can't let the kids find out about a totally normal bodily function. Episode 24 was banned due to the character Jen's older sister getting the kids fake IDs so they can get into a club, and Jen's top falling off, causing her to flash everyone. Characters being naked happened weirdly a lot, particularly the character of Jen. It was always censored, of course, but still a bit of an odd choice when you remember these characters are meant to be children. I love this comment on the 16 wiki calling Canadians perverts. Oh, and I can't not mention the show's absolute banger of a theme song. I'm 16, 16. In 2018, a PSA featuring the main characters was released online to encourage people to vote in the US midterm elections. Not really sure why, since the characters are Canadian and wouldn't even be able to vote in an American election themselves, but it was nostalgic to see new 16 content again. The creators of 16 also made another show called Total Drama Island in 2007. This show is meant to be a parody of the reality survival show Survivor. It follows a group of 22 teenagers who are brought to an island in Muskoka, Ontario to participate in challenges for a cash prize. It aired on Teletoon in Canada and Cartoon Network in the States. It had a very similar sense of humor to 16, including the unnecessary nudity, but unlike its predecessor, it was not censored or banned. However, it was rated PG in the States and accompanied by a parental guidance warning while only being rated G in Canada. The show gained a cult following and spawned an entire series that is ongoing to this day, focusing on a different cast of characters and setting each season. I haven't watched anything beyond the first season, but from what I've seen of the later seasons, they did get a little weird. Case in point, this clip from a recent season that caught the attention of fart appreciators on Twitter. There's also a spin-off series about some of the original characters as toddlers in a daycare, and Jude from 16 is also there. Apparently there is a reboot of the original series in the works, and who knows, maybe I'll watch it for old time's sake. Another show I remember watching as a little kid was Nanalan. It was created using hand puppetry and cardboard cutouts by 2 puppeteers, Jamie Shannon and Jason Hopley. Fun fact, one of the creators is from my hometown, and several years ago he did an exhibition of his puppets at a local gallery that my sister was volunteering at. The show was about the adventures of a 3-year-old Mona and her dog Russell as she visits her Nana and plays in her backyard. It started airing in 1999 on CBC Kids as 3-minute shorts that played between longer shows. It eventually expanded to 21-minute episodes and started airing on YTV, as well as Noggin and Nick Jr. in the US. The show ended in 2004, but it experienced a resurgence around 2016 when it became a bit of a meme on Tumblr and other social media due to its somewhat bizarre nature. For one thing, some of the puppets looked a little unsettling. The Nana puppet was actually at one point changed out for one that was slightly less nightmare-inducing. Mona also spoke in a mixture of English and gibberish and was voiced by a grown man despite being a 3-year-old girl, which led to some hilarious moments. Overall, the show just felt kind of surreal. It's the type of thing where you look back years later and are like, did I hallucinate that? As a weird little girl myself, though, I love shit like this. I think we need more weird children's media. This is the only show on my list today that I actually hadn't seen prior to making this video, although I was aware of it. I think it was on at kind of a weird time when I wasn't usually watching TV. You'll understand in a minute why it was relegated to such a time slot. It was created by the same people who made Nanalan in partnership with Nickelodeon. Like its predecessor, it used puppetry, but this show was aimed at an older audience. It follows 2 teens as they encounter bizarre, supernatural, and gross situations while working at a fast food restaurant in the fictional Scotchboro Mall, based on the real-life Scarborough, Ontario. Yeah, you'll probably encounter some bizarre, supernatural, and gross situations there. It too began as shorts before expanding to full episodes. It aired from 2005 to 2009 on CBC and Teletoon in Canada and Nickelodeon in the US. The puppets in this show were even more unsettling than the ones in Nanalan, and many people cite the show as the source of their childhood trauma. It's hard to describe just how odd this show was, so let me summarize a few of the episodes for you. In Season 1, Episode 3B, the character Parker eats a raw burger which causes a tapeworm to grow in his stomach that keeps eating all his food before he can. The boys lure the tapeworm out using sausage and a fishing line. They end up selling it to an Australian zookeeper who proceeds to swallow it whole. In Season 1, Episode 9A, Josh decides to create his dream girlfriend using the Mr. Meaty Jiffy Meat machine that can create living things out of meat. It proceeds to create, this, named Roast Beef Barb. However, she ends up cheating on Josh with a piece of prime rib. Honestly, this show walked, so Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared could run. It's hard to believe this was supposed to be a children's show. It's definitely more akin to something that would have aired on Adult Swim, or Teletoon at night if you were in Canada. Finally, we come to a show that may be fresh in your mind due to the stir it's caused in recent years. Life with Derek was a teen sitcom that aired from 2005 to 2009 on Family Channel in Canada and Disney Channel in America. It follows a blended family, focusing primarily on oldest step-siblings Casey and Derek. The two have very opposite personalities and are frequently at odds with each other. On the surface, it doesn't seem any weirder than any other teen sitcom of the era, but when you look a little closer, particularly at the dynamic between Casey and Derek, things start getting sus. This clip circulated on social media a few years back.
Derek, you are the most annoying brother.
Step brother.
Same difference.
Yeah, you're right.
Many people noted the weird romantic sexual tension between the two characters that appeared not just in this clip, but throughout the entire show. The controversy eventually caught the attention of the 2 lead actors who had played Casey and Derek, who responded by saying that they had no problem with people reading their characters' relationship this way. Personally, I'm not sure how I feel about it. They aren't technically blood related, and apparently it is legal to marry your step-sibling, but it still feels wrong. Apparently it aired late at night on Disney, which definitely makes it seem like they were trying to sweep it under the rug. I don't know, what do you think? While I wouldn't really call any of these shows huge mainstream successes, they were all able to find an audience beyond Canadian borders and garner a cult following, and several of them were influential in their respective genres. I know I've been kind of poking fun at these shows, but as a lover of weird things in general, I'm kind of proud to say that these silly little shows came from my country. It's also interesting to see how these shows highlight the different standards in Canadian and American television, with Canadian rating and censorship standards seemingly being more lax. Almost all of the shows I've talked about were either censored, rated more strictly, or confined to less popular time slots in the United States. Unfortunately, it seems like weird, low-budget Canadian television is starting to disappear. Teletoon, a channel that several of the shows I've discussed aired on, was rebranded to Cartoon Network Canada earlier this year. Family Channel, while it still technically exists, ended its partnership with Disney in 2015 to be replaced by Disney Channel Canada. Canadian shows like Schitt's Creek are garnering huge mainstream success internationally, and while I'm sure they're good shows, it's just not the same. So yeah, I don't know what we were on up here in the 2000s, whether it's to do with our culture or there's something in the water. I have a lot more weird Canadian shows I could talk about, some of them more obscure, so let me know if you'd like to see a part 2 to this video. And tell me about any weird shows you remember, Canadian or otherwise, down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching and taking this weird and wonderful trip with me. If you enjoyed this video, liking and subscribing would be very much appreciated. I'll catch y'all in the next one.